The third source of knowledge is reasoning. Now, reasoning simply means the cognitive process of using logical thought to reach a conclusion. Now, if you look at this definition, which is quite a simple definition of reasoning, we use our own mind and its critical abilities and develop our opinions. This is what reasoning simply and briefly is. So we use this critical ability found in human beings to understand and interpret things. And this is a big source of knowledge that man has acquired over the centuries. Now, this reasoning has two major types: inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Actually, last time I had an elaborate discussion with my students of research, talking in detail about both of these types of reasoning, their two major forms, and the logical fallacies, logical errors that we as researchers commit deliberately sometimes in order to deceive and win the argument against somebody, and sometimes unwittingly. So here I'm going to be brief because this is just an introduction. So inductive reasoning simply means when we use a specific limited number of events or experiences and develop a generalization on them. So this is called inductive reasoning. So in inductive reasoning, we actually move from evidence to conclusion. So I have mentioned the formula of inductive reasoning in brackets at the end of this point in the slide. You can see IEC stands for inductive reasoning, starts with evidence and leads to conclusion. So we first of all look at the evidence and then we develop a generalization on it. For example, you look at this example. When you look at 5 research textbooks, each of which contains a chapter on citation, how we give references in our research. This is what citation is all about. And you conclude that all research textbooks have a chapter on citation. See, you made a generalized statement. All research textbooks have a chapter on citation. On the basis of what evidence? Just by observing 5 research textbooks. And chances are you might find a research textbook that does not deal with citation because the writer has his own preferences. So he might include or exclude a chapter on citation for certain purposes and objectives of his research. So here we have actually moved from evidence to conclusion. 5 textbooks is our evidence, and the generalization that we developed is that all textbooks have a chapter on citation, which might or might not be true. The second type of reasoning is deductive reasoning, and it is quite the reverse, opposite to inductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning means we use general principles, observations, or experiences and reach a specific conclusion. So here the formula is the movement of argument is from conclusion to evidence. See, it is in opposition to inductive reasoning, where we actually start with evidence and reach the conclusion. Here we make a generalized statement and then we provide evidence. For instance, if we take sort of same example and say all research textbooks contain a chapter on literature review, the book you are reading is a research text, and the generalization that you develop is this book must contain a chapter on literature review. So here what you have actually done is, so the first statement, all research textbooks contain a chapter, is a general observation, and the conclusion that you've drawn is this book must contain a chapter on literature review, which is a specific conclusion about a specific object. So we have moved from general observation to a specific conclusion. So here I should be making a correction. It is not generalization, it is actually a specific conclusion that we have drawn. Moving on to the fourth and the most important source of acquisition and production of knowledge is research, our objective of this discussion. So research is actually a comprehensive activity using experience, authority and reasoning, the three sources of acquisition of knowledge that we have already talked about. So research is an organized activity, and it is actually designed after the scientific method of inquiry. So here let me first briefly define research through a scholar's words. Clifford Woody says research comprises of defining and redefining problems, formulating hypotheses or suggested solutions, collecting, organizing and evaluating data, making deductions and reaching conclusions, and at last carefully testing the conclusions to determine whether they fit the formulating hypothesis. So you can see at this definition that there are many things, many phases involved in the process of research. So research actually is a combination of many sources of production of knowledge, and the analogy that I have used, that research is done after the scientific method of inquiry. As in science, we observe something that cannot be explained by our existing knowledge. We do not know why something happens. Now, this is where our research starts. The next stage is we provide an explanation for this phenomenon. We sort of assume something and then start exploring it, how far our explanation helps us understand this phenomenon. So this explanation that we develop for this new phenomenon that we have just observed is called hypothesis. Here, let me briefly explain what hypothesis is, because it might be confusing for most of you. Hypothesis in research is a tentative explanation of your research question. For instance, in this example, a hypothesis can be your initial explanation of why something happens. So you sort of predict that this will be the result of your research, but you are not absolutely sure about it. It is just your hunch, your guess, and then your reading and exploration will help you either support it or drop this hypothesis for something else that is supported by your reading and exploration. And now the third stage is you test the hypothesis to find out if it's true. So you start with observation of an unknown phenomenon, something that cannot be explained by our current knowledge, and then you sort of give an explanation which is still a possibility, and then you continue to study and read around it to either support this hypothesis and declare it justifiable, valid, or you go against it and have another explanation. So this is how research actually goes. We are not sure about the answers in the very beginning of the project, but at the end of it, we certainly have moved beyond our existing body of knowledge.